Roe versus Wade has been overturned, and that there will be, I believe, even stronger restrictions put on reproductive freedom in this country over the next few years. And, it reminds me of a case that I'm sure you know, the Shelby County versus Holder case.
Hmm.
As soon as the protections around voting rights were lifted by the Supreme Court, states throughout the country began to pass more restrictive laws and change the voting patterns of many people. And I think this is what is going to happen in the case of the Dobbs decision. That the Dobbs decision impact is going to be harsh, and it's going to be sustained if in some way we don't respond to impact at the state level beginning, and then perhaps be able to pass legislation at the federal level to protect reproductive freedoms and rights.
Yeah. There's also been much debate over where it ends. Justice Alito proclaimed, but without much legal support, don't worry, we're not going to go farther than this. It struck me as not really legal reasoning, but more just an assertion. Then Justice Thomas, who he votes with more than just about anyone, wrote separately to say, actually, we need to make gay marriage or same-sex marriage illegal. We need to ban contraception, he said, and make that lawful for states to choose to do. And he even went somewhere that I haven't heard any other Republican appointed justice go, which is to say that he supports the power of the government to imprison people who have sex, sodomy, sex between the same gender, as he put it. What was your response to Justice Thomas's reasoning and statement there?
Well, I think that that's probably a reflection of where many of the states will go. And the question is, will the Supreme Court allow it? What we have is a court that's already said we're going to turn this over to the states. And I suspect that even if there are challenges to more restrictive policies, that the Supreme Court is going to set a very high bar for overturning what the states will do. And I don't think that those assurances are really worth anything until we see the cases that come before the court.
Makes sense. I'm curious your view of the wider hypocrisy or clash that we've seen, because we just lived through the pandemic, which started as a health crisis but very quickly became a crisis or debate over government powers. Understandably so. We are a society where people hear about liberty and justice, and people have those debates. I get it. And yet, I want to show you something that our team here put together. So we're airing this for the first time, comparing some prominent Republican and conservative reaction to optional or partial government encroachments on liberty in the COVID emergency to the choice and abortion case. Take a look.
In South Dakota, we're going to be free, and we're going to make sure that we don't overstep our authority.
Those babies are patients, so they define them as patients, follow the science.
This is a violation of their freedoms. This should be every American's right.
The end goal, of course, is to completely end abortion, which is the most evil act in all of human history.
That's more than freedom. That's the right to control and secure your own body.
Correcting that flawed decision finally allows states and Congress to protect life in ways that we never were able to for the last 50 years.
In the country and in the court, is there even an honest discussion of liberty here?
Of course, there's always a discussion of liberty, but what I think when I hear the differences in the approach between the pandemic restrictions and abortion, what I hear is a lack of concern for women's rights and the inability to accept that women can make their own choices, just as the speakers were saying that we could all make our own choices and should be able to make our own choices during the pandemic. So what is the factor that really comes to mind is that when we're talking about gender equality, there is an attitude that it is not something that we want to pursue as a country, full gender equality, which would include the right to your own reproductive choices. And so we need to have that discussion. Of course, we can have that discussion. But in the meantime, what we have now is that people are going to be put at great risk. Commentary and people who have been fighting for reproductive freedoms will tell you that this case will impact people of color, low-income women, people in rural areas. People will not have access to the health care that they deserve and that they want for themselves and for their families. Right. And so this is the urgent issue that we've got to deal with.